We've been talking, the economy, recession, with our mate Cameron Baggery earlier in the program. And as sort of Labor deals with the iceberg that is Kiri Allen in the car crash, I said yesterday, I thought one of the big stories out of all this has been hidden, and that is the effective resignation of the Minister of Revenue, David Parker. And to background this, David Parker tried to launch earlier this year a campaign to have a wealth tax, which is clearly Green Party policy. He put out some research that had been done, some pretty draconian rules followed by rich people. The idea was to whip up hatred against rich people and build a consensus for a wealth tax in New Zealand. Chris Hipkins made a captain's call that Labor wasn't going to do that, and it would appear that at a dire time for his party, when the Kiri Allen controversy was causing Chris Hipkins major headaches, David Parker goes ahead, throws Hipkins further under the bus by announcing, I'm going to quit as the Revenue Minister, and I'm not going to wait, I'm not going to make it easy for you. I can't see it as anything but an act of defiance. So it doesn't make any difference to the government's revenue policy. And what does it say about Labor's, unity or otherwise on matters of revenue? For some comment on this, I thought we asked David Parker, we're happy to have Labor people on, but they won't front with us. They got some funny little band going on. So I thought we'd talk to National Revenue spokesperson Andrew Bailey, and he joins us on the line now. Andrew, welcome to the platform.
Lovely to talk to you, Sean. I like your introduction.
Look, it seems not just that he's said he doesn't want to be Revenue Minister, and I guess on a personal level, you have a pet project and you don't get it passed, of course you're going to throw your toys out of the cot. What seems to me, and you're a politician, to do that when he did it, at such a dire and difficult time for your leader, that's really sticking the knife in, isn't it?
Oh, it was extraordinary. And the thing is, there's a thing called cabinet collectiveness or unity. And so you can have the scrap within cabinet, but when you come out, you've got to work together, collective responsibility. So to do that and actually wander down to the media and start talking to them about it is just an extraordinary. And I think your word is right, defiance. He will frame it as disappointment, but no one should do that.
And he's not a newbie. Yeah. It's not like he doesn't know the rules, Andrew?
No, it's quite deliberate.
Yeah. Now, if you were to stand aside as revenue spokesperson for National because you didn't like the policy that came out with and say, I'm standing with, and you do it at a really bad time for Chris Luxon, you'd get a good swift kick up the backside, wouldn't you?
Well, hopefully not physically, but yes, I would, because that's not the way politics works. It's all about teamwork, and the thing is, if you're going to have a scrap, have it inside the room, but when you come out, everyone should be uniform and unified, and that's what's not going on. And we've seen it countless times now with Labor, and, all political parties go through that sort of process at times.
Yeah. What is Labor's tax policy?
Well, don't know. All the rumours are they will announce a tax policy in the next week or a couple of weeks. But when you look at it, basically they want to tax more, and that's been the history of Grant Robertson and David Parker. So we've seen the imposition of an increase in trust tax rate. We've seen further changes in the whole wealth project that Mr. Parker loves talking about, which I thought was a shameful poor piece of work actually. Is all about how we increase taxes. And what your listeners won't understand, because no one gets into the nuts and bolts of it, but basically our tax revenue has gone from about 75 billion about 6 years ago to next year about 140 billion roughly. I'm rounding off the numbers.
So we're taking huge amounts of tax.
Oh yeah, and what business would you be happy to own a business where it basically doubles its revenue in 6 years? And that's what the government's done, and that's why we're looking at reducing the tax burden on individual New Zealanders and hard-working families, because they're the ones who've borne the brunt of that tax increase.
Yeah, what about the non-hard-working families, Andrew? What about the slacker families?
Well,
Sorry, I'm extracting the Michael. Hard-working families. Well, who says all families are hard-working?
This is the trouble. This is what we're worried about. See, beneficiaries have had a massive increase in benefits, and I'm not for a moment suggesting it's easy to live on a benefit, but they have had 3 successive rises, 2 by Labor and 1 by us way back in Bill English. And the benefit rate is now close to the minimum wage. Superannuitions have been cushioned somewhat by inflation because they've been inflation adjusted, but the people that have really borne that massive increase is actually people working New Zealanders who've had no tax cuts, and most of them have got young families. That's why we're so concerned about that big chunk in the middle that seems to be the forgotten chunk.
Andrew, look, actually, when I think about it, when I said they haven't released their tax policy, that's due out in a couple of weeks. It makes the resignation of David Parker even worse, if that's possible. He is dipping out 2 weeks before the portfolio that he's responsible for is going to be unveiled on the campaign trail.
And the person that was taken over, she's got a background in tax, but...
Who is the person that's taken over?
Barbara Edmonds. She's been a minister for 6 months, probably 3 months. And I'm not saying that Barbara doesn't know much about tax, but it's a pretty important portfolio, and they will be scrambling to go through all this. Well, yeah, like many of the new ministers have. You must
be rubbing your hands together, Andrew. You're going to have a fantastic campaign.
Well, Labor will do what they do, and we've had our troubles from time to time, but we're pretty clear about what we need to do and what we'd like to do. And I think that's the biggest issue we've got. We look at if we are lucky enough to win in October, it's about how we get the nation back on track economically, but also socially. The division that we've got in New Zealand at the moment is probably one of the worst things we've ever got. But from an economic perspective, I think we're pretty clear about how we're going to do it. It's just going to take a little bit of time to get the economy back on track. But one of the big focus we want is to grow the economy and no one's talked about that for 6 years. We want to grow the economy because when people grow, when businesses grow, they take on new people, ultimately they end up paying the government more revenue in form of tax, but ultimately it's a better outcome for all New Zealanders, and you've got more money to invest in roads and schools and all that sort of stuff that we desperately need.
But as you say, when you think about every angle you look at this from, this was a remarkably defiant move from David Parker. Do you reckon he's going to have a crack at the leadership if Labor don't win the election?
No, I don't. And I think, Sean, it's not just David Parker. Grant Robinson was actually behind it. The two of them are working side by side on this. And, of course, they would have been working side by side on this.
So this is a real schism, isn't it? This is a real schism inside the senior ranks of Labor.
Fundamental. No, across all of Labor, and also you've seen it flow into the Greens now, because if you're on the left, you think the wealthy are there to be taxed. That's what their role is, rather than sort of look at them as wealth generators for the New Zealand economy and people. They just see them as a source of tax and revenue. And so there'll be many, many MPs across Labor and Greens who will be bitterly disappointed that the government's bucked down on this. But we're waiting to see what their tax policies are, but if they get back in, imagine what's going to happen. There'll be a reincarnation on this in about 5 minutes. And the worst thing is the IRD's been involved in all this sort of process and doing a lot of work for the government.
Well, hang on, what do you mean by that? Well, they are the government's advisors. They're asked to prepare reports and do research.
There's a difference between doing work for the government in the capacity of the government and what you might do and what you're doing for a political party, what they might announce in the election. And I think that's a big stuff. So it would have been fine if it was only for the budget, but if they're going to use the same work and it was really designed for the campaign, that's a different issue.
Yeah. Andrew, I thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. We will talk again soon. Andrew Bailey, MP, the National Party's revenue spokesperson, and as he's pointed out, you just look and think maybe the biggest story this week wasn't Kerry Allen praying a car on Evans Bay Parade. Maybe the biggest political story this week is the schism, the split, the Grand Canyon that has emerged in the Labor Party on tax policy, with David Parker at the most inopportune, difficult time for his party, and particularly for the Prime Minister, throwing his toys out of the cot because he didn't get a wealth tax. And before their tax policy is announced, throwing it to a vastly inexperienced minister and talking about it publicly, I think they know the ship is sinking. And it's who's going to get to the lifeboats first.